So, Mike, we're on to Chapter 8, Scalable Operations.
Scalable operations, what most recruiting firms don't have. We were never taught the right way. I grew up in the business in a franchise, and I was never taught the right way to scale, in hindsight.
So let's go deeper into that. Why is the traditional way of recruiting firms hire new recruiters dead?
Because the way we were all taught to hire recruiters is what keeps us playing small in the business. I mean, if you looked at firms that crack seven figures, $1 million plus, £1 million plus, based on my informal survey of the marketplace, it's less than 10% that ever achieve that. It's less than 10% of the recruiting firms that ever achieve that. But the same is not true in legal firms, accounting firms, consulting companies, other professional service firms. And the reason it's dead and I went through this as an owner for 10 years. I was taught you hire a recruiter, you teach him or her everything, how to market, how to recruit, how to prep, how to close, how to negotiate deals, the vernacular of the niche that they're in. And they learn that all in less than a month.
That's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. And I mean, that's what I went through. And it almost put me out of business because I was so bad at all of it. I was only a little bit good at any of it is probably the best way to put it. And in that model, historically, you have to hire 7 to 10 people to keep one, meaning the motivation of the owner to hire somebody in that role is like, it used to be mine. It's like, oh God, this is gonna, even if I bring on 2 people, they're probably not going to make it. You have all this belief system around failure, and you have the evidence based on the system we were taught to do it in that it would actually fail. The other reason I think that model is dead, from my personal opinion, is we're taught to hire on straight commission or incredibly low draws versus commission. And in an age where like millennials or even beyond, people, even when I was doing this 20 years ago, people want the appearance of a real job. And a real job has a salary, and a real job has benefits. And the other reason that the model is dead is the 50% comp plan is a relic of the time where you could have family benefits of around that cost only about $250 a month with a $200 deductible. And that might be $2,500 a month or $3,000 a month. The cost structures, there was no LinkedIn recruiter. The 50% comp plan was engineered in a time where we had 3x5 cards for your candidates and 5x8 cards for your companies. That was your overhead on a desk. And again, when you look at how the recruiting firm industry scales versus how other professional service firms scale, there's a complete disconnect. There's only one role in a recruiting firm. That's account executive or search consultant, some people call it. And you can never even you start there and you never evolve past there. That's not scalable from a standpoint of building a firm that is not only 7 figures, but multi-7 figures.
Since we both agree that teaching somebody everything at once is overwhelming and really not a great way to bring on new people, what are the roles and career paths that can easily allow you to scale your operations?
So when I studied how other professional service firms scaled, it's rare that you find in most of them that you start in the role that you finish. You generally start in a role. You can hire somebody in a role where they do one aspect of the business. First of all, for like a solo operator, the first step to scale is to outsource your research. You shouldn't be going through LinkedIn profiles, or if you do, only a couple hours a week max. So from a standpoint of when we talk to the smallest level firm, scale by outsourcing research. You don't have to hire somebody. You can hire a company. You can hire somebody through Upwork, outsource the research. But once you get into a scale mode where you want to build a team and you want to add recruiters, the term I use is search associate. Other professional service firms hire associates. A search associate is someone, and their sole role is to find and identify talent on your existing open searches. And then they work at that until they master it, until they're consistent with their metrics from Recruiter GPS. They were all put on accountability structures. And then you can transition them into account executive, where they now take all the skills that they've developed as a recruiter, and then you just teach them marketing. And when you teach them marketing at this stage, they already know the vernacular of the industry. They already know what a great search assignment looks like because you've been giving them your search assignments. And they already know what deal flow looks like because you've been involved with that with them. Now you just teach the small chunk of marketing, which albeit is not easy to master, and you layer that in. So you have them now start to develop their own assignments. And then they get to a point where they're consistent with their marketing, they're consistent with their recruiting, they're not working on your material anymore, and then they're working on their own. Now they've become the account executive that you wanted to hire them into maybe a year before. But they're much more profitable, and the turnover rate is 3.5 times less when you bring them on in this role. And then eventually, somebody that becomes really good as an account executive that has an acumen for developing new business is you want to leverage that business, hence the word scalable, and you can make them a practice leader. So now they can hire a search associate to do some recruiting for them. They don't stop recruiting, but they can, if that practice leader is doing 3 interviews a week, you can layer in a search associate to do another 2 interviews a week, bringing that team to 5 interviews a week, almost doubling the production of the team by leveraging the business development acumen of the practice leader. So those are kind of the stages of growth you can get into in a scalable operation.
That's a great approach to scaffolding a person in their career and getting them at each section so that they can get proficiency.
Proficiency and mastery at each level, which also builds confidence to go to the next level.
And motivation.
And motivation. And retention. I never had a big biller leave my firm, what we defined as, say, a pace setter, somebody that did enough to earn the President's Club trip, never left our firm because there was always the next step. And none of them got paid 50%, by the way, either. Like I said, that's an archaic compensation package from the 1970s. So it's huge, and we're going to talk about in the next chapter on retention. Having this type of career path leads to higher retention of your people, because historically what happens is you build somebody, and if they're really good and they get to $300,000 or $400,000 a year, after 4 or 5 years, a lot of them want to go off on their own. And a lot of times it's not even personal with the owner. I've talked to a lot of these recruiters. They have a lot of respect for the person that hired them, but they're like, I'm billing $400,000. He gets 200, I get 200, but I don't know what I get for my 200 from him. Meaning the owner manager has ceased providing value. So the question I always asked myself as an owner was, what do I have to do to earn the amount that I keep as the business owner? That'll kind of transition into retention, but this is how that, you use the term, I like that, scaffolding is always setting up the next challenge.
That's great. You talked about, even the solo operator, there is an area to scale and a type of role to scale with. How do you know when it's time to hire for your own business?
It's never the right time to hire in your business. You can always, because the right time is when you're too busy. The other challenge is some people, I don't want to hire a search associate, meaning somebody to do the recruiting, until I have enough business. Well, there's an element of truth there, but there's never enough business. And you don't want to put a new search associate on a great search. You want to put a new search associate on a non-exclusive contingency opening where you're not accountable to it, to the client to fill the position. I never put a new search associate on a retained or an exclusive search. And I let the employer know that. I've got Mr. Ms. New person working on this non-exclusive contingency opening because you don't invest in retainers or you don't believe in exclusives. That's totally okay. But I'm going to have this new person work on this, and it's kind of a training ground for them.
So you would say that the best time to hire is
now.
And
always. To hire is now. And if you have the cash flow, I always coach that you hire in pairs, because it doesn't really take that much longer to train 2 people when you do it the right way. And we'll cover some of that in onboarding in the next chapter, and put it on a calendar and just commit to it. And then it's relatively easy, unless we're in a severe recession, to go out and find a couple of openings with that might not have the best fee and might not have the best terms for a new person to work on.
How do you build a culture of continuous improvement? I mean, we talked about the scaffolding of the roles, but how else do you create that culture?
You create that. One is we always had contests and incentives. So, but which kind of was the kind of a carrot approach, to having to help people achieve at higher levels. But continuous improvement. We also worked toward getting, and our contests and incentives were also designed to give more points and value to money up front from a client, or exclusive contingencies, or monitoring week-to-week numbers and the consistency of execution of their recruiter GPS. So when these are things that are always talked about in your weekly meetings as a company, is to how people did against what they committed to doing. That's one way when it's constantly talked about, where it's continuous improvement. Number one. Number two is we would also have everyone had to present a book per quarter to the entire office, meaning they had to read a book on motivation, on technique, on selling, on something that I approved that was business oriented. That could help the rest of the team. So they would take it and then they would say, here are the top 10 things I took from the book and here's how I'm applying them. And they didn't have to take even the rest of the office into consideration. I wanted them to go through the book. I wanted them to pull out 10 concepts and I wanted to talk about how they would apply it in their business. So those are some examples of things you can do to constantly have a culture of continuous improvement.
Great. Finally, you spoke about the 50% comp plans are dead for a multitude of reasons. What does a typical recruiter compensation plan look like now?
They most look like the one I hate. And so when we take on a new client, a lot of times you'll find some remnant of that 50% agreement, a lot of straight commission type of language. It doesn't. So I always ask people, that are hesitant to go to a salary from a draw, that if somebody quits after 3 months and you paid them a $2,000 a month draw, how much of that money do you get back? And the answer is none of it. So if you paid them a $2,000 a month salary, in effect have the same result, and I don't know if I'm not recommending 2,000 a month, but X amount of thousand per month, whatever you would pay, you'd get the same result. And when that person goes home to their parents, to their significant other, and they talk about a job with a base salary, even if it's a lower base salary, it's a base salary job versus it's a real job versus, oh, that sounds like straight commission, right? And you're not going to have, it's a connotation that's unnecessary. Now, you don't pay the base salary plus the 25% starting commission rate or the 20% starting commission rate. You pay a base salary, say, of, let's just use this term, $3,000 a month, and you only pay, say, 10% on the first $10,000 brought in every month, and then you pay 30% over that or 35% over that. You'll pay out less per $100,000 than you would on the old comp plans. So a really good plan that's going to be attractive and help retain people and allow you to scale is one that has a salary element, one that has a benefits element, and one that has a commission element that pays a higher percentage on higher income, but pays only probably 5 or 10% on the first 100,000 cashed in per year.
Excellent. Do you have any final thoughts on scalable operations and when to hire, who to hire, and how to hire?
We're going to really talk about hiring in chapter 9, which is recruiter attraction and retention. Of the optimizer model. But this is the point, on how to scale, and all these things. The beauty of it is they're all systematized. There's benchmarks for each one of these roles. There's a benchmark for a search associate. There's benchmarks for account executives, for practice leaders, and it's all. This is how they all tie into each other. So to try to implement this in the absence of knowing recruiter GPS would be an exercise in futility. because you're not clear on how they're performing, or are they ready to go to the next level.